I'm going to ask Paul to speak just for a couple of minutes first, and then Jerry, and then I'll open it up for questions from the press. Thank you. Paul.
I won't speak for long, you know, mate. I'm Paul Holmes, I'm the branch secretary of Kirklees Unison, which is not in Scotland. I only want to say three things, really. I think the first thing is the general election has really politicised people in Britain. I think there's been more discussions about politics subsequent to the election. People have been transfixed by what's happened since the general election. And what they've been transfixed about, really, they don't particularly vocalise it, but they suddenly realise who won the general election. The bankers won the general election, and they decided to form a government. And that's what's been going on. And everybody's realised that all the campaigning is just the political classes falling out with each other. That by and large, you know, I don't normally fall out with Billy Bragg because I like Billy Bragg, but this sort of facetious argument that, that you should vote Liberal for tactical voting to stop the Tories getting in has shown exactly the sort of crassness of not voting for somebody that you should be voting for. Because you voted Liberals, 6 million people voted Liberal, and the Tories have got in. With Liberal support, they wouldn't have got in otherwise. And it's a really interesting election. And I think this is the next interesting election that follows it. Because there's two elections coming up, both of which will finish by the autumn of 2010. And that will determine the leadership of the two biggest trade unions in Britain. And as importantly, in some respects for the press, the two biggest affiliates of the Labour Party. And I think the interesting thing about it, we haven't endorsed each other's campaign, but the interesting thing is the rank and file candidates. The hostility that comes from the political classes for standing for election for a lay job is unbelievable. You would have to experience it. It's basically you can't do it. This is an election about who looks after working people. Now the bankers have decided what the government is, because there is no doubt that the talks that are taking place behind closed doors are not about scrapping Trident, they're not about scrapping nuclear missiles, they're not about coming home from Afghanistan, they're about what the working class have to pay for the greed of the bankers over the previous period. And I think we have to lay that purely in front of our members, because otherwise you're kidding them. You're kidding them that their pensions are safe, you're kidding them that they've got job security, you're kidding them that there are jobs for young people. It's the first general election in my lifetime where nobody promised anything but pain. It's the 11th general election I've been involved in, and they only promised pain. And to public sector workers, I think, who our members are represented by, to public sector workers, this is going to be, I smell 1979 and 1980, and worse besides. And the atmosphere that exists in engineering, in British steel, in British coal, in the early 70s, they knew what were coming. Anybody that comes from a coal mining area like I do, they knew what were coming in 1980 and 1981. And in local government and in the health service and further education, higher education, they know what's coming. And our members have got a mixture of anger, a mixture of vulnerability and a mixture of anxiety. And that's what we've got to go into this election about, to represent them people, because nobody represents them. You watch the television and you think the debates about this lord and that lord being on this ship and that ship and who lives with him and who wants to marry him. And then you've got the situation where you've got the ant and deck of the upper classes, David Cameron and Nick Clegg, because that's what they are, deciding which public school boy is going to make which cuts. And I think we've got to say for the working classes, you're not making them cuts, you caused it, you pay for it. Cheers.
And I'll just hand straight over to Jerry to save time.
Thanks very much. But these two unions, Unison in Unite, unite the biggest union in the country, and potentially, with the emphasis on the word potentially, the most powerful, would be a mighty force if the General Secretaries-elect had in their hearts and in their minds the will of the members, they were of the members and wanted to hand the union back. These two elections, amongst many, by the way, within the trade union movement, there is an election for the FBU General Secretary. Matt Rack is up for re-election. We've had an election just gone within the PCS. I was overjoyed that Mark Sawatka was re-elected on a 2-to-1 majority in the PCS. How is it? How is it that we have this Lib-Tory pact, who for bums on seats, the Liberals ditch their opposition to Trident, £75 billion at least, That 25 billion of the 75 could be pensions, state pensions, making it not the third worst in Europe, but the best in Europe. 25 billion on houses, homes and hospitals. Public money built by public workers, 3,100 of which are blacklisted construction workers. They should be the first that are offered those jobs. 25 billion still left over, by the way, that could be spent on green energies. 1 million green jobs. And we're now in the face and staring in the face these cuts and staring into the abyss. By the way, when I used that language at Hustings in Sunderland with Rolls-Royce workers and conveners from around the country, a candidate in the election for Unite, so shall remain nameless unless you ask me who it was, but he's the favourite and front runner, said, I think you're exaggerating a bit there. We're not really staring into the abyss. That might be his view. And on a job for life, which the appointment system gives you, perhaps you're not staring into the abyss. Tell that to red car workers. Tell that to LDV vans when we had a march for jobs, marched us to the top of the hill, the factory still closed, and we're still at the top of the hill. Tell it to Cadbury workers. Tell it to 2,600 RBS workers that was announced in the swirl of forming this coalition government. But the opportunity that we daren't miss, waste, or squander is the 2 elections for the biggest 2 unions in this country, for Unison and for Unite. And Unite, without question, potentially the most powerful. That will be our choice and 1.7 million members' choice. And if we hand the union back to where the power lies, if we give control and authority of decisions in those workplaces and those branches and those sectors, if we turn it from a business union that it now is to a service union, the members decide, the union provides, the strength of the union is still in it for the fight that we have to have, then there will be that chance. Will we win every fight? Probably not. If we don't fight, we'll lose everything. That's what's up for grabs, why I say we're staring into the abyss. But the opportunity that we need to recognize and seize is these 2 elections that we have before us now. That's our choice, that's our opportunity. And who would argue that the whole of the class, employed, unemployed, a union member or a non-union member, a member of Unison or Unite or any union or any pensioner, would not be strengthened by a fighting union, a rank-and-file, member-led, member-controlled union with a General Secretary, and I'll finish on this chair, from my part, on an average wage. Why not the General Secretary on the same money in Unite as the workers and members of Unite? Why not those members choose who is the official that represents them? That's called election. And this is the election that I'm standing in, and I'm very proud to take part in the press conference with Paul Holmes. He's right to say we've not endorsed anyone in this election just yet. But I know if anybody asks me, who I'll be recommending.